Is artificial intelligence really changing your life today? And what will it do to you in the near future? Will it lead to nuclear war? Well, let's unpack that on today's episode of The Steve Beeman Show. Welcome back, my friends. And I wanted to chat today about this idea of AI and what it's really doing. I read an interesting article last day about weaponization of AI and how it could lead to really significant problems in the geopolitical world, mostly derived from deep fakes. You know, we saw that in the election cycles in the United States a couple of years ago, and we continue to see it where you can make it look like any person says anything. And it looks like it's as real as that person talking. So what happens if we get a miscalculation because we see, Prime Minister Netanyahu threatening nuclear war on Iran? Or what happens if we see Putin effectively threatening nuclear war or anything else? These launch on warning systems, all now driven by AI, actually could inadvertently lead us into a significant problem. So it's another dimension to this growing and highly intelligent artificial stuff that we're building that we want to watch and be careful of. I'm not a big conspiracy person about it, worried about it. I think AI ultimately will be good for us, but I think it's something we need to be aware of it and learn how to deal with it so we don't get these kind of deep fakes that can, create a false flag scenario where one side thinks another side is launching nukes against it. I think it's continually going to be on the lookout. And it goes to the whole point I've been making in prior podcasts about the next world war. It won't be fought like we think it will. It will be fought in cyberspace with AI on power grids, social media, and everything else. Right now, I think it's fair to say the Russians especially are trying to play out a paper that was published in Moscow University in the early 2000s talking about the dissolution of the United States as an objective. And that was being done following the collapse of the Soviet Union with kind of a get back at you moment. And that paper outlined the Russian government actively participating in creating social breakdowns in the United States, using race and belief systems as drivers for social unrest. Well, we've certainly seen that in the last 10 years and increasingly so. So it's something all of us want to be aware of and take a look at, just to know that it's there. But watch out for the deep fakes. Make sure that what you're seeing is actually real. The other thing that caught my eye, I think we should talk about, is what I think of as almost weaponization of class. The G7 countries now are debating global wealth distribution more than ever. If you live in the United States, and if you're looking at this saying, well, it's about time the rich pay their fair share, you better understand that the lowest 10% in this country are wealthy compared to most of the world. So this redistribution of wealth from the G7 will affect the middle class of America as much as anybody else. We want to keep a close eye and be aware of this kind of stuff. The globalization of the last 30 years has not helped America in general. It's helped the wealth effect because as companies' profits went up, investors in 401ks and IRAs and retirement plans and pensions, their wealth went up too, but at the cost of a lot of times the middle class. Well, we're trying to see a restructuring of global trade right now. We'll see how it plays out. We don't know if these tariffs will be successful or not, but hopefully we can bring back some of the middle class jobs that have been lost. Now, with that, there's a caveat, and that's that we don't know what the digital world will bring to that. What will the ultimately long-term impact be of the digital economy on middle class jobs? We don't know. It's pretty easy to forecast sitting here today on the impact on truck drivers, the impact on manufacturing, robotics taking over a lot, but we don't really know where that will go. As I always do, I urge people to become familiar with the AI and machine learning systems so that you can become part of that, not controlled by it, but you can use it. So I think it's something that if you partner with it and become smarter than it, which you can be, and know how to apply it and use it, you'll benefit in the next coming evolution of our economy. Um, this whole thing about the G7, I just want to go back. We want to be careful we don't slip into the envy economy that I've spoken about. Just because someone else has something doesn't mean you don't, especially in a free market or so-called free market. I know the United States is far from a free market, but in this generally free market system we have, the wealth effect multiplies. It grows over time. So it's not a zero-sum game. The fact that someone has money doesn't mean you don't. It means you both can prosper. To give you a specific example, if I buy a stock at $20, someone else buys it at 20. If I sell it at 30, I've made $10. Now the next person bought it at 30 could ride it to 40. They also made $10. Just because I made money doesn't mean they didn't. And there is an upward bias to the economy and to the markets. So the wealth effect is real and it's for everybody. So don't get caught up, please, in this envious because they have it, I don't. And we're going to do future podcasts on health insurance, the good, the bad, and the ugly of universal health care. I know there are a lot of people who want universal health care, and I understand the arguments, and I think we need to talk about it. I'd like to present some ideas on healthcare that take us into the digital economy that maybe others haven't thought of yet. I'll be publishing white papers on a lot of these issues in the forthcoming weeks. So as we look out, let's be aware of the deep fakes and let's not get caught up in the envy economy of the G7. I want to take a deep dive today into the real changes that are taking place from the delivered AI that's out today. Keep in mind, this is not totally new. I mean, AI has been with us for quite a while, but the implementation of it into the real world, the actual use of it, has exploded in the last 24 months. And it's just the tip of the iceberg. It's going to get a lot more powerful for you and me. I think we can look for it to do wonderful things. But I want to list some of those areas we're going to see demonstrable changes really in the near term. This is going to come faster than we think. And it's part of the whole notion that tomorrow doesn't look like yesterday. First and foremost, as I listed these out, the biggest thing I see changing is education. And I think education is built on a 19th century model. That's a manufacturing model. We put kids into a factory, in effect. We teach them rote things and they come out. In the old days, that worked. In the new idea economy that's coming about, that's not going to work. The idea of the STEM educations of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics are critically important. But as important is to teach critical thinking, to teach people how to solve problems and how to identify the problems that need to be solved. I think one of the things being lost in the generations coming up is their ability to conceive of new problems because technology is handling most of what we used to think of as problems. Just like I do. I mean, you can go into a search engine or an AI search engine, especially, and find out just about any information you need. But the question comes down to, do you know what you need to search? And do you understand the application of the answers that you're getting? Education, as it is currently structured, isn't designed to teach this kind of thinking, and we need to migrate toward that more and more. I think we're going to see more AI tutoring, so we're going to see a lot more of the rudimentary skills of reading, writing, and arithmetic taught by AI bots. There's no reason in the world they can't do a lot of supplemental teaching for the teachers. Now, this is where I go back to my comments I've made time and time again, that I don't see AI replacing teachers. I see it supplementing teachers. We don't want to be afraid of it. We want to embrace it, and we want to make it part of our curriculum, part of our teaching skill set and our tools so that we can appropriately bring kids into a world that is digitally driven. It's going to happen. It's already here. And let's not stick our heads in the sand and hope nothing changes, because it will. I think if we look at the second idea that in education comes to my mind, and this is talked about a lot, and that's the idea of, instead of degrees, let's look at credentials. I think it's very easy now to build a credentialing system that gives you a targeted education into specific areas you want to be focused on. I don't know that the paper degree is going to be as important anymore as just being credentialed into the job you want. If you look at people who want to make money in social media, Which is more important, to study the general curriculum of a degree or to focus your study time in on social media, how it's built, how the algorithms work, how you can best exploit the use of that for your customers' needs? I think the idea of credentialing versus degreeing, if you will, is going to become very, very popular in the next 5 years. I think you'll see it all over. I do think the digital age in education creates a real threat to some of the institutions. I've talked for many years that I am not against government. I'm not against business. I'm against big. And I think big is the dangerous now because it becomes bureaucratic, self sustaining, and on its own life support. I think in education, you're going to see a restructuring of these big institutions where it's no longer necessary to have a Harvard degree. You create a custom degree based on the best and brightest academic advisors you can find. This is an inevitable technology. And with the integration of all the Web3 facilities of the metaverse into AI, video conferencing and all the rest in real time, the notion of Web4 will completely transform how education is done. I think it's inevitable. I don't think there's any way around it. Second to education is finance. And I think here we're going to see a decentralization of finance like never before. We've grown up in a world of centralized finance, whether it's a bank, a central bank, all of these things, credit cards. We're moving into a world of decentralized finance where it's peer-to-peer. And again, you can go down and you can look at the peer-to-peer transfer systems now, PayPal being one of them, but all of the different transfer systems. Imagine a world in which that's done almost by token rather than by currencies. We're almost there. The idea of tokenizing the economy is a very real thing. And again, when you move from Web3 to Web4, where this becomes an integrated platform, the idea of tokenization of everything becomes real. Again, I've talked about this post-industrial capitalism for a long time. It's only been in the last 5 years that it's really crystallized to me on what it means financially. And what it's going to look like is an advanced barter system based on tokens, where you can go into a seller of a good or a service that you need and negotiate directly with them for a price. No slippage, no fees, none of the problems you run into running with credit cards and all the rest. So the digital economy decentralization and what ultimately will be de-dollarization is going to be real. I think you're going to see programmable money and AI run markets. And those two things really do change the way we work. The programmable money scares me a bit. I've written articles about the Federal Reserve and its move into the digital currency. One of the things I don't like about programmable currency is the social score effect. I talked to you in prior podcasts about the Chinese and how they use a social score to determine your financial well-being. Well, it's entirely possible that the Fed, using a Fed coin, could determine the value of your currency based on how well you adhere to the government's lines, how well you adhere to government rules and regulations. That's a little scary to me. But I think technology and AI-driven technologies of tokenization will stay ahead of that. So even though they try to do it, they won't be able to regulate you because you just won't use their currency. I mean, we'll see where it goes, but I think the AI and blockchain capabilities tied together really do give us some abilities to operate freely amongst each other without the real impact and the overriding control of other people. So I think that's exciting. I look forward to that. Additionally, I want to talk about healthcare because I think the cost of healthcare will come down. I think AI will incredibly improve our ability to treat and diagnose disease. I think in terms of the biopharmaceutical industry, it's going to create wildly new and impactful drugs. I think more than that, though, we could, using wearable technology and telehealth technology, actually start to reduce our dependence on drugs. If you go out and you take your phone today and you snap a plant, you take a picture of a plant, it'll tell you what the plant is, what you need to do to make it healthy. Well, more often than not, it's just changing the way you water it or something relatively simple. I think we're going to find out that with the human body, the same is true. If we get ahead of diabetes, if we get ahead of a lot of these things and change our diet and our habits and our routines, we may be able to eliminate a lot of the needs for drugs in this country. I gave a talk recently talking, and I was referring to what's going on with boys in our country and how they're all on the ADHD medicines. Well, here's the thesis of that. And I read this in an article which really opened my eyes. Picture the world of a 13-year-old boy. They get up in the morning. Now, these are 13-year-old boys who are beginning for the first time to be turning into men, and they're loaded with testosterone, which makes them want to be aggressive and go out. They are now waking up in the morning and having Fruit Loops for breakfast. I'm not down on Fruit Loops specifically, but look at any of the major cereals, they're all sugar. So what are we doing? We're giving that 13-year-old kid a sugar high as he gets towards school. By 10 o'clock, he's drinking a Monster to keep himself awake because he's coming down a little bit. Noon, we feed him more sugar on these lunches that they serve in the schools. By 2 o'clock, his sugar has collapsed, and he now can't focus. He's tired. He's worn out. So he struggles through the rest of the day, again, popping Monsters whenever he needs to. He goes home, and instead of going out and playing in the yard and physically working all that off, he sits in front of a computer and plays video games. No wonder he's out of whack. No wonder he's out of balance. We've got to eliminate the sugar from that diet, and we've got to get him outside to get real, true exercise. Again, I think that the AI impact on that and the education and learning and the help we can get with that is real. And I think that's an area that's going to lower our healthcare costs more than anything. Jobs clearly are going to be affected and are being affected by AI today. The paper pushers are going to be gone. It's the idea that a repeatable, replicable job that's just done over and over and over again. A data entry clerk isn't really going to be necessary any more than in manufacturing, where robotics can do repetitive jobs. I think we want to look positively at this, though, and say, how can we use AI to make us better in our job and more valuable? We don't have to succumb to it as a replacement for us. We can use it as a supplement to us. And that's a critical distinction. So when it comes to jobs, we don't have to look at it as a threat, but a complement that can make you more powerful because you understand how to use it. And that's a critical, critical juncture. If you don't know how to use it, well, you'll certainly be left behind, I guess I should say. But if you do know how to use it, you can leap forward and become powerful in your newly found skills. So I urge you to get to know everything you can about AI and its impact on your job and what it might do. And let me look at ownership, by the way. We've grown up in life, liberty, and property and those kind of value systems. The idea of the blockchain and AI together dramatically change ownership. In terms of corporations, we're going to see the establishment and more growth of the DAO, or the distributed autonomous organizations. In voting, we can change that through the blockchain to a DAO structure, and we'd have completely free of friction voting. I don't know that that'll happen because I don't think politicians want it. But when you go to the ownership of the DAO and of the blockchain of AI, you see decentralized ownership at a massive scale. Now, think about the stock exchange for a minute, the New York Stock Exchange as an example. That represents decentralized ownership. By being able to take a company public and sell its shares to the public, you're decentralizing ownership. But as any of us know, that's not perfectly frictionless. And there are still controls that happen in that company that make it less than perfect. Well, under blockchain and DAO construction, you can actually distribute ownership in a purely equitable way with a purely efficient structure. Now, that's both scary to those who've grown up in the old capitalism and exciting to those who can accept the new digital capitalism. I think it's something that you need to be aware of and study, and who knows, maybe you'll become part of a DAO that I create. In terms of governance, we talk about, again, the DAOs and their governance through the blockchain and smart contracts. I think you'll see increasingly a loss of faith in federal and big institutions. I go back to this mindset of mine that big is bad. Sometimes it's necessary, but it's dangerous. It's fire, right? A little bit of fire can warm you, warm a house, cook a meal. Too much fire will consume you. Same is true of almost anything. A little wind will disperse seeds around and be good for the environment. Too much wind, and it'll rip your house apart. Government, business, healthcare, education, all of those are the same. A little bit of it, some of it's absolutely necessary and critical to our civil life. When it gets too big, the bureaucracy begins to want to self-survive, and that's when it becomes inefficient and too big to operate for our benefit. It operates for its own benefit. I think the governance capabilities of the DAO and the blockchain put together allow us to retake control of these institutions so that we can build faith in them, knowing that they serve us, not the institution itself. I go back, and I know a lot of people have gotten upset with me about my belief in Doge. I don't, conceptually, I don't care if you like Elon Musk or not. I just don't care. I don't know the man. I've never met him. But what they're trying to do is right. They're trying to look at this great big $5 trillion budget and say, where can we make it more efficient? Where can we cut out abuse and fraud? It may not be as big as some of us think. It may be bigger. I don't know. But why not bring the government itself into the digital age? Why not let it use more open blockchain technology and DAO structures so that you and I can see what is going on? Maybe that would restore our faith in some of this instead of having it behind closed doors all the time. I'm a big believer in the DAO and big DAO, there you go. And I'm a big believer in blockchain. And I think together those things can create or recreate a trust in institutions that are openly managed to the benefit of the stakeholders themselves. Clearly in the media, we've seen a change already in the digital economy with the alternative media coming about. Everyone has a voice. I'm no different. I've got a voice. I don't know how many people will listen to it, but I have a voice. Everyone can have a voice, equally distributed now. The old days of ABC, NBC, and CBS ruling the roost are gone. They're done. They'll never be back. I would even argue that cable fixed programming is going to hurt. It has to be entertaining, and that degrades its news content quality, because the more they try to entertain you, the less focus there is on news. And that's going to be something that the next generations, they understand it. And they'll be very cynical about where they get their news. They're going to understand deep fakes. They're going to understand when the news is tilted one direction or another. The idea of censorship that we've seen rear its ugly head from one side or another, there will and is a push for censorship. Sorry, it just is true. The government does not like you having free speech. And by the way, neither do companies. They all want you to be pro that company. They don't want you to badmouth them. Well, this push against free speech will be decimated by a decentralized social media platform that gives everybody a voice. The challenge is going to be for you to determine who's a real voice, who has genuine thought, genuine content that you can act upon and exist with, versus who's just there to rile you up. I did a podcast on billionaires and hypocrites, or I think I called it, what was it? Billionaires, hypocrites, and oligarchs, or billionaires, oligarchs, and hypocrites. And the whole idea was that there are people who go out there and just try to gin you up. They try to make you mad. They know the more angry they get you, the more entertaining they are. And so the more you'll watch them, the more you'll click on their videos, the more you'll comment. I can see it. If I launch a thoughtful, real podcast clip on TikTok, I might get 5 comments. If I do a flamethrower and throw something out just designed to gin up the crowd, I'll get tons of comments. Well, that doesn't make it right. My hope is that you guys will come to see that what I'm trying to do is real and the content I provide you is real. And that way we'll have a relationship based on trust and reality, not just based on flamethrowing. I see it all the time out of politics on both sides of the aisle. Neither side is clean. They both throw bombs just to get noticed. Well, I'd rather not do that. I'd rather have real content and real help for real people. I think that's where this has to go in the long run. And I think the younger generations are smart enough to see that real help for real people can be achieved through these social media and alternative media platforms. Now, driving all this is energy. And we've talked about energy. I think distributed and smarter solar and smart grids, together with digital twins and power systems, and ultimately nuclear, I think that's going to be our saving grace. But we're talking cold fusion, perhaps, as opposed to hot fusion. There's all kinds of new work being done on technology for energy. This is going to have to happen. And I think the big players know it. And that's where big is good. They have the resources to build this new type of technology. And I think we're going to see it. So I think the ability of AI to solve problems faster, the idea of faster computers to faster solve problems, machine learning, robotics, blockchain, all of that plays together to help us build bigger, more powerful, more efficient power distribution systems. I'm not worried about it. I keep an eye on it, but I'm not worried about power. I mean, I've told you before, I had somebody tell me that AI is a immoral thing because of its power consumption. Well, I don't think that's true. I think we just need to solve for the problem. How do you get more power into these data warehouses? I think we can do it. I just think we need to be open-minded and look for alternative solutions, which this technology in and of itself will allow us to do. So I'm actually optimistic on the energy side. I'm not that big a pessimist. But finally, on the list that I want to chat with you about, well, not finally, I'll go through two more: human relationships. This idea of a human to human connection. We've seen that change dramatically with the impact of social media. People acting happier than they are, playing victim more than they should. All of these social interactions that have migrated from a handshake and a look in the eye to a social media player, the bullying that goes on. 50 years ago, you didn't have bullying because the bully got beat up, and that was kind of the end of the story. Now, not only do kids face bullying in social media, but they take it home with them. There is no sanctuary. There is no place where they can go feel safe at home like we used to have. I think the next generations will know how to deal with that better. And again, I think the integration of the web into Web 4, which brings all of those tools into one platform, will begin to more normalize it around human interaction. And I think that people will ultimately learn how you just block people who are being idiots on commentary. It's the old anonymous comments, right? And I get them, but I tend to open them up so everybody can see them because I think they're funny a lot of times. But this idea of human interaction is going to be dramatically impacted by AI. And I think you have to get to understand it. So again, it can complement your work and your family and your relationships, not be decimating to it. And then finally, and this is my last point on this, but religion. I think we're going to see the rise of what I'll call digital spirituality, AI preachers. I think there's going to be a lot of question in people on what is truth. Now, I come out of a biblical Christian perspective where I believe in the scriptures. I believe from the beginning of Genesis to the end of Revelation, they're true. I'm not sure we always interpret them properly. That's not God's fault. That's ours. And I know we don't always live up to those standards. I've certainly had my share of non-Christian behaviors in my life, and I have sinned as much as anyone. But when we look at the reality of faith and the reality of structure, and we try to look in this digital world for much more continuity and truth, I think there will be a reasserted look at the core faiths. And obviously I believe that while traditional dogma may die out, I think ultimately faith in the scriptures might come out. We're seeing a movement toward that in younger people already, where they're moving toward the Christian church. If you're Muslim or you're Buddhist or you're, of an alternative view, I'm not trying to fight with you. I come from that worldview. I'm not going to hide from that, but it doesn't mean we can't have a dialogue, and certainly using the digital world for our communication and the ability of us to really try to talk it out, so to speak. There's no reason if we differ in our faiths, we can't still be communicative friends. I don't get that. I don't think we need to go to this extreme or that extreme. I think we need to meet in the middle and try to solve the real problems we have. Otherwise, we're going to have nothing to solve because it's going to end in a disaster. So as we think of these technologies, I don't think you think about it as convenience so much, but think about it as freedom. Ultimate freedom for you and for the institution that you work with, and the redefinition of value. And that goes into the Tao and the ownership concept. I don't believe in communism. And I don't believe in communism because I think this naive approach of from each according to his ability, to each according to his need, doesn't work. because the person with the ability won't voluntarily give up their labor for another person's benefit. We all are innately born with a selfishness. However, I think there are new structures of ownership that can come on that can eliminate some of the problems caused by free markets. I think we definitely can look to devalue monopolies as we distribute the ownership of goods and services and companies and operations and relationships. I'm optimistic about that. I think we'll see a new form of capitalism. And when I say capitalism, by the way, I'm going back to Adam Smith. I'm talking about the free exchange of ideas, goods, and services among free people that are voluntarily executed. To me, that defines capitalism, not this government interacting with business, picking winners and losers and giving favors. That's toxic. I To me, free markets and capitalism maybe goes more toward a libertarianism, but it's the idea again of you and me giving our ideas and our goods and services back and forth freely without government interference. You can charge what you want, I'll pay what I want. I think that freedom gives growth in the economy, and that's what drives innovation and what drives excellence. So I think we're going there just in the digital space. And I think it's going to be very, very different with the ownership of these ideas. So I have gotten several questions from people that have come in based on either other shows I've done or things I've written. And I want to answer some of those for you because I think they're really good questions. And I think we all need to think about it. But one of them, somebody wrote me and said, how do I make money in a system that I barely understand anymore? And I get that. I mean, I grew up in quantitative finance. We built quantitative alpha models, and it was a world in which there was risk-adjusted excess return that could be earned by better understanding the financials of a company. Now, with high-frequency trading, with the enormous computer programs that run the markets, I'm not sure it's all the same anymore. But what I say to that person, and I would say to you, is ultimately supply and demand are the rulers. And if you have a company that produces a product with high demand, and they have the ability to run that company efficiently with good supply chains and good supply operations and good production, that company in the long run will prosper. It goes to a Warren Buffettish mindset that says buy the quality and the value of the companies you want to own. If you don't know which ones to own, I tend to say buy big baskets. But the S&P 500, I think the Morgan Stanley Global Index. I think these give you access to big groups of these companies and helps you eliminate the short-term volatility based on the daily news cycle. Again, these bots running the markets parse out every word being said. They're going to react faster than you. So trading into that is difficult. But investing for the long run by buying these real solid, institutional organizations, Coca-Cola, General Electric, that stuff, it's a Warren Buffett thing, that can still work. And I think all of us need to extend our time horizon on our investments. By the way, that's not to say that an AI-driven trading strategy can't work. So a lot of them do. But I would caution you and say for a lot of those that work, there are a whole bunch that didn't. And so unless you have a lot of free money that you can waste, I wouldn't necessarily play in that space. Here's another question. Should I be buying digital assets or sticking with fixed real estate and stocks? I think it depends on your time horizon. I'm not out to give investment advice because I'm not an advisor. I'm not licensed. And I have no impact on any of this. But my general thought is that commercial real estate is going to go through a transition. You've seen in the markets that commercial real estate has a $2 trillion problem, and it's coming due this year. These office buildings have lost occupancy coming through COVID, and now they're at a point where they have to refinance those buildings, but interest rates are up so much it's going to bankrupt them. So commercial real estate could have some real values coming up in the next 12 months. That may be an area through a REIT or a real estate investment trust or something else you want to play. But clearly, and then with respect to the stocks, I think if you hold for the long run, I tend to, as much in my life, I've always been a growth player. I think at this stage in my life, I'm a little older, I'll probably shift into being a value player and look for the best value I can find. That's true in products I buy and services I buy and stocks that I might want to buy. I'm scared of AI. How do I avoid being replaced? You do it simply by learning AI and making it a compadre with you. This is, again, we've talked about it today in another podcast. AI doesn't have to be your enemy. It can be your friend. If you learn how it works, and not the details, you don't have to be a programmer, but learn how to apply it into your job, into your interest, it will make you a more interesting person and make you more valuable in your job. Again, almost regardless of what you do, if you make AI your friend, you're going to have a valuable assistant who can make you better at what you do. That's going to be the key to that. This one I love. Can we really trust anything online anymore? I'm not sure you ever could. The old thing, I saw it on Google, it must be true. And you've heard that about everything. I saw it on TV, it must be true. I think we're growing up in our ability to be cynical about what we see. I urge you to take everything that I'm doing and, consider it whether it's true or not. I think you'll find it to be true. I think it's incredibly important as to whether or not you do. But, take a look and be cynical about what you read, especially with the deep fakes that are coming on, and make it work. And then finally, the question, what if I don't want to be digital? Do I get left behind? The answer is yes, categorically. Either this time around, when I wrote my first book in 1980, it was all about don't be left behind in the coming microcomputer revolution. This time, it's not just a revolution of small things. It's an overall revolution of how economies work and how things work. So I would urge you to make technology, make digital, make AI your friend, and don't be left behind as we go through what will be the biggest transition since the Industrial Revolution, without any question. So the world around you, it's not glitching, it's transforming. And you could look at the matrix and go, oh my gosh, where are we headed? But the sooner you see these patterns and the sooner you start to jump on board with this, the sooner you can rise above the noise. And that's going to be the critical component. You've got to build something that lasts in your knowledge. And that's what we're about. So tomorrow, I'm going to break down the biggest lies being told about freedom in the digital age and how we now control it. So as always, stay strong, stay sovereign, and stay free. I'm Steve Beeman, and thanks for listening.